If you were to go outside and ask the first person you see if they've heard of the game Super Mario Bros, 9 times out of 10 they will say something like, "Why yes, I love that fat little red man." It isn't even a debate whether that game is the most famous platformer of all time. I actually bought a second-hand NES and a copy of the game because it's such an iconic piece of gaming history. But when it comes to platforming titles as a whole, what sort of things improve the game experience? What actually makes a good platformer? The first and most obvious answer to that is fun platforming. It's the core gameplay and 90% of what you'll be doing in most of these games, so this really needs to be good. Now I've broken down what fun platforming can mean, and the two main elements I thought of are the controls on movement and the game flow. Controls on movement. You need to be able to make your character do exactly what you want to do. It shouldn't be some sort of battle to get your character to move across the screen. This movement also sort of includes how your movements work with the levels. If there's a level where you keep hitting the corner of a ledge rather than land on top of it, the game will become frustrating very quickly. This is why I think 2D pixelated platformers like Celeste work so amazingly. While there are tons of tricky, almost pixel perfect jumps and dashes to perform, nothing ever feels finicky or annoying to do. It takes a lot more for 3D platformers to have the same quality as 2D ones might, but one that does it pretty perfectly is Mario Odyssey. The sheer amount of movement in this game and how perfectly it all feels to move around is what makes it one of the best 3D platformers of all time in my opinion. Game flow. Let's go back to Celeste for a moment. This game is all about failing over and over and over again. It actually shows you your death count at the end of each stage, because one of its many messages is that it's okay to fail. It's all part of the learning process to fall and be right back where you started. You shouldn't be punished for your perseverance. And that's why when you do die, you immediately get to retry again. No death sounds or animation, no you lose screen, not even a visual showing that you have one last life. It lets you back into the action straight away. Recently, I've been playing a platformer called Velocity Noodle. It's overall pretty decent, it's got a nice cyberpunk aesthetic, and it pushes for very fast-paced platforming. The issue it has, however, is that when you die, you kinda have to restart with this ready set go thing, which briefly takes you out of the action, not enough to ruin the experience, but just enough to make dying a much more painful experience than it should be. Celeste and Velocity Noodle are both relatively similar in a few ways. They both have pixelated graphics, they both have somewhat similar styles of movement, and while playing Celeste is pushing towards you learning from every mistake you make, Velocity Noodle is pushing away from that a bit more. And in a game where you're inevitably going to die over and over again, any 3-2-1 go sequence is going to get really annoying over time. This is almost magnified by how much space doesn't get used in the levels of Velocity Noodle. You're in these huge open space environments, and any disruption to the game flow just adds to the fact that the platforming and action is slightly stretched out for each level. Another pretty important element, not just for platformers but for most games, is level design. In platformers, this is extremely important because most of the gameplay is coming from the construction of the level. Levels need to start off simple and let the player get to grips with the controls, and then start to sprinkle in new game elements as you go. In an ideal world, there is a sweet spot for platformers to be in, where the player isn't coasting through the game and repeating the same gameplay elements, but also isn't getting overwhelmed by getting a new mechanic thrown at them before they fully got to grips with the last one. Again, Celeste is a fantastic example of this, but one of the grandfathers of platformers, Super Mario, is a golden example of this innovation without smothering the player. As you progress each game, you get introduced to a new mechanic, and the great thing is, they never try and stretch that mechanic out further than they should. If something is about to become stale, bam, suddenly you're a fucking T-Rex. Mechanics aside, half of the level's appeal comes down to the style and aesthetics. You don't want to be playing in a boring world because that's just not stimulating enough and it would suck to play through. Take Velocity Noodle for example. While I have a bunch of issues with the game, like how it randomly puts me back to the first level sometimes, and this stupid fucking drone that makes each level it appears in feels like Satan himself designed the video game, I cannot fault its visuals. The cyberpunk aesthetic and the vivid colours make it stand out, and the combination of that and its pixelated style create what is my favourite design choice in video games. I mean, for God's sake, one of my all-time favourite games is VA11 Hall A. How can I not like it? Lastly, and perhaps not quite as importantly, the story and character design. This isn't something specific to all platformers, and really, it doesn't even make a difference to a bunch of people. But for me personally, and I'm sure many others, playing as a character you like in a story you care about can make the world of difference. Celeste's play character, Madeline, is an absolute gem. I mean, really, she's one of my favourite characters ever, and the story you play through adds this extra reasoning and incentive to keep trying the tricky platforming. Yeah, you might get frustrated at certain parts that you keep dying to, but come on, get up dude, we have to reach the summit to help Madeline. It doesn't have to be anything too special or elaborate, but adding story to a game is sort of that icing on the cake, you know? Like if the gameplay is the ingredients to a meal, then the story and the characters are the spices. So, if we put all of these factors together, we can sort of rate certain games in a sense. Super Mario Odyssey, the controls are immaculate, the flow of the game is of course fantastic because it's a AAA title. While the story is fairly basic, it's fun and it has cool characters. Plus, the level design is almost unmatched. The Ninjabread Man. This is a game I was bought for the Wii when I was younger. Its controls are disgustingly bad, it has next to no story, and it generally only has negative reviews. However, he's kinda cool. Velocity Noodle. The controls are pretty spot on here and everything feels responsive. Its game flow can be disruptive at times, and while I think the level designs are good overall, it could be nicer to do more with the large amounts of empty space. My main issue is the lack of story or anything interesting with the characters. I honestly bought this game hoping for some kind of interesting character or story to be mentioned somewhere between the levels, but the most I got was this guy just trying to explain the controls to me without breaking the fourth wall. Celeste. Now, this is one of the best platformers. The controls are 10 out of 10, the game flow couldn't get much better than it already is, the levels feel both clever and fun to play, and the story is absolutely fucking fantastic. Honestly, it isn't even fair to me to compare this game to most other platformers, because I think Extremely OK Games caught lightning in a bottle here, and produced a really special game. So I think it's pretty obvious what my favourite game is of all these. The Ninjabread Man. God damn, I love this game. Look at the way he moves. Holy shit, it's the fucking Ninjabread Man.